Hello everybody and welcome to the introduction of this video. This video is long, and it is daunting. When I sat down to film this video, I started immediately with the first upload to this channel, talking about what brought me to make content on this website. That was in October of 2017, and I catch everybody up on almost everything that I have been through since then up until now. Some of the things that I go over in this video are what brought me to YouTube, some of the videos that are my favorites that are still up. I talk about some of the videos that I uploaded and then why I chose to eventually take them down. I talk about how Jaquel became the profile picture, mascot, and the alter ego for this channel. I talk about some of the mental health struggles that I went through and the challenges that I faced trying to consistently upload to YouTube. A major highlight in the mental health struggles that I faced since I've been uploading here is back in the beginning of 2019 when I started hearing voices that claimed that they were spirits, and why I ultimately came to the conclusion that it probably was mental health crisis as well as spiritual phenomenon. I also talk about how I met my headmates. I talk about how I realized that there were, in fact, deities and other spirits that I could talk to, sort of bringing that theory together. I also talk about how I realized that at the end of 2021, I realized that I was not, in fact, who I thought I was. Not only was I not who I thought I was, but I was actually the person that I was looking for the entire time, and that I had been this person the entire time that I had been uploading to YouTube. I also talk about what led me to start uploading to the witchy side of TikTok, which ultimately brings me back to why I felt the need to make this video in the first place. That's because I've been uploading to the witchy side of TikTok very consistently since the beginning of May of 2021. And I recently announced my soft departure from that type of content. And there was no easy way to explain exactly why I felt that move is necessary. I was trying to think of a way in which I could go about explaining that. And honestly, I felt that this was the best way because there's no easy way to give a simple and precise answer without going into literally everything. So once again, this video is long, but it is a complete overview of the history of what went into this YouTube channel. It's also the story of me. This is my story. This is also the story of who Jaquel is and what Jaquel is to me. This entire video has been an undertaking. It's daunting. Parts of it are extremely dark because I talk about a lot, and most of it isn't fun. A lot of this video is also going to be difficult to believe, though I'm not going to ask anybody to believe everything, only so much that you believe that this has been my genuine experience. Whatever it was I was experiencing. So strap in, Dorothy. This isn't Kansas anymore. We're carrying on like good wayward sons and daughters and children in between. And if you're still here with me, welcome to the video explaining the road so far, starting with my first upload at the end of October 2017. I started uploading to this channel at the end of October of 2017. My son had just been born a few months before that. I had just moved 3 hours away from my hometown where I had lived my entire life, and I had just gotten out of a really bad situation where I was living in a place that had been completely overrun with mold for about 9 months. And I was jobless, everything was different, and I really didn't know what to do with myself or how to spend my time. What I spend a lot of time doing, though, was spending time with my infant son and watching YouTube. Somehow, someway over the course of the last year, at that point, YouTube had become somewhat of a coping mechanism. because I could watch people talk about whatever or get into whatever, and it took me away from the really bad feelings that I was feeling and how really difficult my life had gotten at certain points. YouTube became a coping mechanism. At that time, in mid-October of 2016, my favorite YouTuber had become Shane Dawson, regrettably so. This was a time before he had become canceled, and when he was canceled, I also chose to no longer support him. But this was also 4 years ago, before I knew about Shane Dawson what I know now. So, for better or worse, I was very inspired by Shane Dawson. He was my favorite YouTuber. I was watching the video as it was released, the one where he, Garrett, Drew, and Ryland had done their own little satirical take on the 72 questions with Vogue, and there was something about it. It was just a bunch of friends goofing off for the camera, making me laugh. And I just thought to myself, I could do that. I looked around, I realized I had a pretty decent phone at the time. I had not my own laptop, but my partner at the time had a laptop that was equipped with Windows Live Movie Maker. So I knew I was going to make crappy content, but I decided to start making content nonetheless. And the first video that I uploaded was a cigarette review. In years past, I had a friend, and we would sit around and watch YouTube, and we watched cigarette reviews. And we would spend most of our time making fun of these cigarette reviews. So I made this cigarette review of Marlboro Red 100s. And I wanted to make fun of cigarette reviews. So it was sort of like a parody, it was satirical, and it was meant to make fun of cigarette reviews while also at the same time giving an honest cigarette review. As time moved on, I eventually realized I didn't want to do cigarette reviews because I wanted my channel to be more accessible to other people, particularly people that don't care about cigarettes, or if any minors should wind up enjoying my content, I don't want to influence them. So after a point, I had like 6 cigarette reviews, and I just took them all down, which is why you will not find them. In some way, YouTube and making my channel, building my brand, became sort of a hyperfixation. I started looking at tutorials and how-tos and tips and tricks for making your YouTube channel stand out. For the first month or so, I was still using my legal name, which is now my dead name. And I had come to the conclusion that I did not want to be part of the brand, if you will. I was also really inspired by other content creators such as Markiplier and Jacksepticeye, and their channel name wasn't necessarily their name, and it was something that stood out. So I went looking around for something that would help my channel stand out. Then I realized that I had the perfect opportunity. Before I had moved away from my hometown, my partner and I were part of a D&D campaign, and the character that I had created was a half-orc, half-elf Eldritch Knight. His name was Jakel. While we were playing that campaign, that took place over my birthday the year before, and for my birthday, one of our party members, who was an artist, drew an artistic representation of myself as my character, Jakel, and she presented that to me for my birthday. And I realized that was the perfect profile picture as well. Now, Jakel's family name was Blitzgrok, which loosely translates into Bloodfield, and I figured that would be a little bit of a mouthful for others to say, oh yeah, you know, this other creator, Jakel Blitzgrok. So I decided not to use Jakel's family name. So I was trying to think of something that would roll off the tongue, something that would work. And then I realized, just Jakel. That's it, Jakel. Just Jakel. And that is how Jakel became the profile picture, the mascot, my alter ego, and how the name of my channel came to be. Now, while I was making content, as very terrible as it was, I was also really doing a lot of research into trying to figure out how the algorithm works. And I knew by the evidence of others talking about it that the algorithm was very consistency based. The more you uploaded, the more your content would be pushed out to others' trending page and such like that. So for that year during the Christmas season, I had decided to do a 12 Days of Christmas. This put a whole bunch of very amateur content with terrible lighting, terrible sound, and all around just me being a goofball with no experience. And it did not have exactly the outcome that I had hoped. It did work to the extent of putting my content out in front of more eyes, but those eyes decided to take it upon themselves to tell me, one of them literally telling me, that I was in fact the world's worst YouTuber. This was a little bit after the new year that I had received this comment, and there were other comments that were just mean and nasty, something that I was not used to or accustomed to, so I decided to quit. We see now that didn't last long. I took some time to sit within myself, focus on other things, and take care of my kid, focus on trying to find a job. Basic, normal, everyday stuff. I also wound up accumulating way too many hours in Minecraft. Because for Christmas, I had gotten Minecraft for the Xbox 360. And when I wasn't taking care of my kid or looking for a job, I was playing Minecraft. I put way too much time into that particular world that I had built. Well, it would appear that the wheel of fate had turned. And my partner at the time had found a job, and I wound up in the position of being a stay-at-home parent, something that she and I agreed upon. So I became stay-at-home parent, and I once again did not have much to do in my free time. So when I had free time, I decided to start making content again. However, this time I was prepared to lampshade myself and taking on the title of the world's worst YouTuber. I wanted to let people know right away in the beginning that yes, I am aware that my content sucks. So that is why still to this day, most videos I open up with, "Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, Chicago, the world's worst YouTuber." This phase in my YouTube career was very experimental, and I tried out a lot of different things. One of the most prominent ones being surviving the hardcore scene. When I was a little bit younger than I was then, I was a metalhead who started going to hardcore shows. That was when I was introduced to the concept of hate moshing and crowd killing. So I had spent a lot of time just being so freaking against the entire scene. So I wanted to make a hyper-exaggerated, inflated caricature of that part of myself. So I made that character for that video. I also spent a lot of time on Instagram, and I would catch myself surfing through a lot of martial arts demonstrations. Since I myself am a martial artist who has gotten very rusty in the last couple of years, I decided to do a martial weapons demonstration. And again, it was supposed to be satirical, somewhat of a parody, where once again I am doing what I had done before with the cigarette reviews, where I am making fun of the tropes, but I also took on a character, so you knew right away this wasn't supposed to be taken seriously. I'm goofing off and having fun by making fun of the things that I love. There were also a couple of other videos that I had uploaded that I eventually took down. One of those being a mental health PSA, which was me just being angry, talking about a lot of the misconceptions and myths that were out there about mental health issues. But eventually, I decided to take that down because I didn't like my attitude in it, and I realized that some of the takes were also maybe not as misleading, but still misleading nonetheless, so I took it down. I'm also a Star Wars fan. Now, I make the distinction between myself and a fanboy because, one, I am a trans femme non-binary person, so I'm not a boy. Two, I really hate the toxic energy of some circles within the Star Wars fandom. And that came to a head when I had learned that Kelly Marie Tran had been bullied off of social media entirely by the same fanboys that I already had a problem with. So I made a video expressing my grievances with that. But eventually I wound up taking it down. There wasn't really a problem with it in general. I just did not want that to stay on there because some of the things that I said just weren't things that I believed in anymore. And although it was still a bullshit thing for anybody to try and bully somebody off of social media for a character that they portrayed in a movie that they did not like, yeah, that's still fucked up. Then in the middle of the summer that year, my partner and I wound up moving into a place of our own. We moved into a new place and it was a different setting and there was new energy. At some point I realized that my mental health really still kind of sucked even though I had enough things to distract myself where it wasn't completely crushingly overbearing. So I tried focusing on some of the things that made me me before. Some of the things that I had wound up either letting fall to the wayside or things that I really felt I needed to become more complete. Because things got really derailed the year before. Things really sucked, and then we found out that we were going to have a kid, and I just automatically stepped into this dad role, where it was still me, but a lot of my own personal interests just kind of got forgotten about. So I made an attempt to bring some of those things back to life, and I presented them in a certain way on my YouTube channel. One of those videos being looking like a rock star. And once again, this whole attitude of, on one hand, being semi-serious, but also satirical, but also making a parody of my own self, where it's not supposed to be taken seriously. I'm trying to get laughs out of people by making fun of myself, but it's also based in something that is one of my own interests. Part of the reason that I had the luxury to do that was because when we lived in the apartment that had become overrun with mold, I wound up gaining a lot of weight, like 60-something pounds. So some of the clothes that made me feel good, I couldn't fit in anymore. So in April of that year, so now 2018, I wound up actually properly being diagnosed with ADHD and was prescribed Adderall. And with Adderall, I wound up losing all of the weight that I had gained so I could fit back into some of my clothes. So I wanted to make a YouTube video out of it. But not in your stereotypical way, in a way that was completely me. So I did this in the video that I believe is titled Looking Like a Rock Star or something to that nature, where I pick an outfit, and by the end of it, I wind up playing guitar for my son and all of his stuffies. It was really cute, it was really wholesome, but it was, oh my god, it was still so cringe. I kept on with this same energy, and I wound up making a video. At that time, Vinnie Paul Abbott of Pantera had passed away. And I had a whole bunch of rock and roll magazines that he had made entries of advice. It was advice columns from Vinnie Paul Abbott. Now, once again, that video got taken down because, well, a lot of the more problematic elements of Pantera's history and their views and the type of people that associate with them so strongly and heavily, well, I wound up not wanting to support Pantera or some of the more ignorant people who enjoy their music. So I took that video down since then. Remembering the frustration and the annoyance that I had felt, receiving very negative feedback just a few months before when I had quit, I was anxious about some of the negative feedback I could receive from the metal community because, let's face it, a lot of the metal community is very toxic. So I actually wound up making a 35-minute video essay on why metal elitism sucks. And that video was called, Am I Metal Enough? That video to this day is still one of my favorite videos that I had done because I just had an idea and I went with it. And I was very self-critical of my production quality, if you will. And even in the video, pardon my speech impediment, even in the beginning of that video, I opened up with a little cautionary like, hey guys, sorry this video's resolution might suck. But if you get through it, I actually really like a lot of what I said there, even though it took me 35 minutes to get around to everything. Riding directly off of the high that I had given myself being proud of the Metal Elitism Sucks video, Jaquel almost took a very interesting turn. See, Jaquel almost became the half-orc of heavy metal. I made an entire video dedicated to this rebranding. Then one day, before I was going to upload it, I looked at myself, I snapped out of whatever had gotten into my head, and I was just like, no, we're not going to do this. So instead of uploading that video, I made a completely different video where I talked about how that video was made, but I wasn't going to upload it because that would have been a bad turn. And in that video, I sort of talked about what I really wanted to do and how I struggled with what I wanted the Jaquel persona to be. It was in that video that I also officially made the distinction between myself and between the Jaquel character. And that part of the problem was I really didn't know how to be myself. So Jaquel became this alter ego that I became way too invested in. So after that video, I stepped back and I took a short break because I realized that if this was where I was going to go, if I didn't really think about what I wanted to do moving forward, then, well, maybe it was best to reevaluate some things. In that short break, I wound up finding another YouTube channel called Internet Comment Etiquette. For those of you who don't know, Eric is a teacher of Internet Comment Etiquette, and he goes around YouTube and he leaves proper and respectful comment etiquette for us students, the viewers, to learn from. Yeah, that's a very bad description of the channel. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. It's obnoxious, and to me, it's absolutely hilarious. During that break, I binged all of his content. Even the previous channel he had before Internet Comment Etiquette, which I believe was called Let's Go to Class. I just ate it up. And I really remembered what I had originally started doing on my channel, which was taking the things I love and emulating them in some way with my own spin on it. The next video that I made was a satirical homage to that content. I was the dedicated student of Internet Comment Etiquette, where I wanted to demonstrate the things that I had been taught by Sensei Salvia. Now, at this point, my equipment still wasn't great. I still had the same phone that I had been using the entire time, and I still had my girlfriend, well, now fiance at this point, my fiance's laptop, where I was editing all of these videos on Windows Live Movie Maker. But somehow I just used all of my brain to think of different resources where I could emulate this to the best of my ability. And as well as emulating one of his videos, I also used all of the tropes, the gags, the jokes, the recurring themes that he had going on in his videos that really was going to be a nice little Easter egg, a little treasure trove of love and dedication that I poured into this video. To this day, I am still so proud of that video. Because it was in that video that I looked at myself and I said, hey, I think I can actually do this. And then my mental health caught up with me. Ever since we had moved into the apartment that I now affectionately refer to as the shithole, I hadn't been able to take care of myself the way that I needed to. When we lived in that place, we were fighting the mold 24/7, and I could get into it more, but a lot of it is still very difficult to talk about because things were so bad that I became the host of my DID system. I didn't realize it at that time. It would actually be not until December of 2020 that I realized that there was a host switch that had taken place. But because our former host was only aware of Darren, there really wasn't a lot of communication. There was still this mental barrier, this amnesia wall between the host of our system and the rest of us. Since we had not been able to establish really good communication, when I became the host, I just assumed I was the host that had always been there. And I think that really is a factor of what happened, because I didn't know who I was. I was going off of somebody else's memories. And looking back, that sense of identity and lack thereof really played a part into everything that happened. And it's at this point where, as much as I want to continue talking about the history of my channel and what I was going through and what I went through, it's just extremely difficult to talk about. The point is, that was one of the last times that Jaquel actually felt like Jaquel. Jaquel was supposed to be this character that I had taken on, and officially at the point after the moving forward letter from the world's worst YouTuber, the one where I almost became the half-orc of heavy metal but chose not to, I really decided then that I wanted my channel to be a place where people could just get away and be entertained. There's so much that goes on in the world. There's so much bad. And at this point in 2022, it really seems like nobody's having a good time. There are so many things that are going on and things that have always existed that are now being brought to the forefront of our social consciousness, if you will, that things are really dire and things are really bleak. And ever since that point in my channel, I have struggled to try to get back to that. I have tried my damnedest to continue making content. And for better or worse, ever since then, my mental health has not been great. There was a period in time, in the beginning of 2019, I started hearing voices. I had no idea what was going on with me. I think it is due in part to a case of mismedication, because I did not realize then that I was autistic. I did not realize then that I was the host of a DID system and that there was repressed trauma that our brain had made us forget. There are a lot of factors as to why being prescribed Adderall and sertraline was probably not a good idea. And it was at that point that I started hearing voices. Now, in years past, my system and I have always been very spiritual people. We had come to the realization that we were psychic mediums, and at this point, we had to develop those skills. We had to learn how to take care of ourselves, but we didn't have a lot of formal training or instruction. So our psychic abilities only came to a certain extent. And for whatever reason, this mental health crisis converged with all of these psychic abilities that we didn't know how to deal with or how to cope with. And it really became a very bad experience where for 10 months I could not get it to stop. And I was very outright, I told my therapist everything. And at that time, I had turned 27. Whatever the case is, my therapist had told me that I was past the age where worrying about a psychotic episode that would indicate schizophrenia would be a thing. So that's why she did not believe this was the case. And of course, I also brought it up to my prescriber, who then also prescribed me 2 very strong antipsychotics that I was on at the same time. And it still didn't really work. And at this point, I was very much struggling with accepting that these voices were spirits. For many months, I was like, I'm just hallucinating. Because believing the things that these spirits are telling me, that these voices are telling me, such as being the reincarnation of the last great king of Atlantis, who somehow was one and the same as the angel of death, Azrael. I am not going to get into everything that happened because I'm just not ready to. Either one, I would sound like a complete mentally unsound individual. Or two, people would think I am outright lying. And honestly, looking back, I'm still not sure what I believe happened. The best conclusion that I can come to is that since I was on 2 antipsychotics, and in spite of that, the voices didn't stop. They didn't subside. They didn't go away at all. I started remembering all of the things that I had learned becoming a paranormal investigator and a ghost hunter. So I started treating these things as if they were spirits. And then it started to work. That's when things actually started to work, and I was actually finally able to get some relief. And that's when I started doing the math, looking back, started realizing what these voices were telling me was complete bullshit. I started realizing that the time in which these voices started was exactly the same time I had started taking sertraline and Adderall at the same time. So that's when it started. I felt like I wasn't getting help from my therapists. I felt like there was no relief in sight. So what I did was I dumped all of my medication down the drain and I flushed it all down the toilet. And that is when I started to recover. Because now I had started treating these voices as if they were spirits. And I started putting up magical protections. I started doing banishings, which I had already learned. I had started treating these things as if they were actual entities. And I was able to keep them at bay, and I was able to keep the voices under control. At this point, I felt safe enough to try and get some rest. After flushing all of my medication, I didn't get off of the couch for 2 months. I was so exhausted because I had been going nonstop since we lived in the shithole. I had been going nonstop, and I was going purely off of a diet of Adderall and caffeine. There was no strength left in me. And my body said, oh, we don't have that fuel anymore. You don't have anything to pull from either. We're sleeping. And we sat on the couch and we napped for 2 months. And the only thing that I was able to do was sleep, sit on the couch, and take care of my kid. Now, mentioning my kid is saying that I was going through a time period where I was hearing voices and hallucinating. Rest assured, my son was always okay. These voices never told me to do anything bad to anybody. They never wanted me to harm anybody. Really, in order to get into it, I have to try to tell the whole story, which is very difficult to do. Just know that myself and everybody else was okay. And then I wasn't okay. After 2 months of sleeping on the couch and not getting any rest or reprieve, I didn't see a future where I could recover from this. How could I recover from this when this had been my life experience for going on 9 months at this point? I really didn't see a way out. And that's when I wound up going to an inpatient care facility. While I was there, I realized that something needed to change, and I needed to just move on, force myself to move on, and do whatever I could to focus on anything else other than what was going on in my head. While I was there, I was given a different set of medication, and that actually helps drastically. I actually wound up on a mood stabilizer, and that helped in ways that I cannot begin to describe. But while I was there, I also felt a spark reignite in me. And once again, my hope was YouTube. So, from that point on, the end of October, I focused all of my energy gung-ho onto YouTube. Because you see, at this point, I had been unemployed, been a stay-at-home parent This was October of 2019. The last time I had a job was when we lived in the last city that we lived in. So from October of 2019 all the way back until August of 2017. It wasn't easy to find a job with that kind of gap in my employment. And since our schedule and our money was tight, it was difficult to find childcare other than myself for our son. So I really felt stuck. So what I wound up doing was going back to YouTube. Focusing on YouTube really felt like my only hope to find a way to get subscribers, make a name for myself, and actually get out of the hole that I was in. Part of what had hung me up from being able to make content was that I had this idea for the way that I wanted my content to go. I scrapped all of those ideas and I started over fresh. I started over just thinking about what can I do without worrying about the things that I had done. What do I have at my disposal to use to make content? And that is exactly what I fucking did. Because along the way, I had forgotten that what I have with me is what I have to utilize. What I have right here and right now has always been my greatest strength. And that is me. That is myself. I also wound up with the privilege to be able to afford a new software where I could do reaction videos. And I started doing those videos. I started doing reaction videos. I also remembered a video that I had done way in the beginning of my channel that was a coffee review. This coffee review was from the Player One Coffee Labs. And I wanted to do those again. So I wound up just saying, hey, girlfriend, fiance, here is a sample pack for $30. Next payday, can we just get it so I can make content? And we did. And I made those videos because Player One Coffee Lab had the Leroy Jenkins coffee blend, which is the one that I had originally tried. And then I just got that one. I went in order from the light roast, medium roast, dark roast, and then I re-reviewed Leroy Jenkins. And this was something I put a lot of effort into, and a lot of love and joy went into this, and life came back to my YouTube channel. This was probably the most productive and creative experience that I had while doing YouTube. I just had ideas that were coming out. I even came up with new ideas. At this point, I had really gotten into the YouTuber Justin Wang on his channel, Wang. He does a lot of these internet history types of videos, focusing on more of the dark and obscure sides of the internet. And I really loved those. And then I started to remember some of the things that I also loved in the past, which was cryptids and all things supernatural. So I made my first video that is now the Jekyll's Internet Adventures. At the time, they were the Coffee Table Internet Adventures. And those were also an attempt to bring myself back to something that felt good, which was talking about the things that were my interests. The three that I have up now that are still Coffee Table Internet Adventures. The first one is the Ghosts of Halo, talking about some urban legend that came from the Halo 2 and Halo 3 video games, which was the Ghosts of Halo. I did a deep dive researching this. The next one was the Chicago Mothman, because the Mothman was one of my #1 favorite cryptid of all time. And since I grew up in an area that was close to Chicago, I was like, yeah, let's look into this. And then after that, many years before, I had come up with this idea, well, Dahlia, a former host, had come up with this idea that the Slender Man, if it was real, could actually be a genie. So we did a deep dive video into that, and each one got progressively longer. The first one was like 35 minutes, the other one's an hour and 4, and then the last one is an hour and 43 minutes, something like that. And at the end of the Slender Man video, I promised a Ouija board video. I wound up making a couple of others, and I took them down because I just want to redo them because I feel I can do them better. So now we have a straight jump from the Slender Man one all the way to the newer one that was put up at the end of October, beginning of November, which was the promised Ouija board video. Fast forward a little bit into around March of 2020. This was when the first lockdown that hit America really took place in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I wound up trying to change my content again, not too terribly much. I just wanted to pull from different ideas and try some new things out. I wound up looking through Anthony Padilla's channel, particularly the I Spent a Day With series, and he had done a video a few weeks before that, which was I Spent a Day With DID Systems. And in the course of watching that video, I realized, oh my God, I'm a system. By the end of that night, I had met all of my headmates. Now, I'm not sure what really took place. I'm not sure what really happened. The best I can come to understand is that the amnesia wall, I always put right here because it's cutting off from the front of the head to the rest of it. So the wall that separated the front consciousness to the rest of us came down, it broke, it shattered. And other systems in my research after this also said that they experienced something similar. Either it was a wall came down or the shell broke. Something of that nature, I realized I wasn't alone in this, and I was actually able to talk to my headmates. But because this was a very serious amnesia wall that came down, I spent a lot of time being dissociated. This felt a lot like what was going on when I was hearing voices. So I had come to realize that when I was hearing voices, I was constantly dissociated for several months. But as I came to look at my headmates and get to know them, I realized that my headmates were there at that time. But not every single voice that I heard was a headmate. The more I got in touch with my headmates and started to actually get to know them and start to realize where they were as looking back in my life and in my past, in my history, starting to realize where they were, I was like, okay, you make sense. You've always been there. You've always been there. You've always been there. Looking at Nina, Dahlia, and Raven. But at this time, I also didn't know that the host switch had taken place years before. So I remembered the stories in my memories, which was the host memories of Darren. So I'm sitting there looking around like, where's Darren? It was really nice to get to know my headmates. It was really nice to actually start to understand more of what happened to me the year before. But I just tanked research. I obsessed over learning about DID and OSDD and learning as much as I could. I studied professional papers. I was listening to other systems' experiences. I found Facebook groups to start talking with others. And it was a really cool experience. But even so, not everything that I experienced in 2019 was completely explained by being a system. The night that I met my headmates was March 26th of 2020. I started figuring things out, and it took me a few weeks before I started actually asking questions, such as, all right, I understand that being a system was a part of it. I understand that my headmates were there, and I just didn't recognize them as headmates. Who were all of these other motherfuckers? And that's when I met King Hades. There was another figure that was hanging around, dark, spooky, ambiguous, and then I just looked them in the face and said, "Who are you?" "You're not going to believe me. Try me." And that's when I figured out that spirits were also a factor. And my assumption that it was mental health crisis mixed in with spiritual phenomenon because I am and have always been a psychic medium, yeah, that was right. There are probably going to be some criticisms that I can assume might breach the comments section of this video if you've made it to this point. One of those being, well, how do you know it's not maladaptive daydreaming? Because I maladaptive daydream as a coping mechanism. And when I maladaptive daydream, I can tell, hey, this is a daydream. I don't think this is actually happening. I can recognize that although it is maladaptive and it's very intense and feels very real, I don't actually think that it's happening. I can recognize a daydream as a daydream. This is something a little bit different. So, how do you know that these spirits are spirits and not headmates? My answer is going to probably be a little bit lackluster for some people, and that answer is they feel different. I can feel a headmate. I can tell that they are in here. I can tell that their source comes from here because I spent a lot of time observing my mind, meditating, getting familiar with what my headmates feel like. So I can tell this is a headmate. That's not a headmate. You feel nothing like any of my headmates. I am also going to be grateful for the time that Dahlia was our host. She had spent a lot of time developing her psychic abilities and being able to feel what was around her and being able to feel and be able to tell what was what. Being able to feel presences, being able to tell the slight distortions and the energy around us through visibly looking at it. The way that we have come to understand is if we sit down and we unfocus our eyes, this usually works in the dark. If we look at a space and there is nothing there, then there's nothing there. But if we look, there can sometimes be this silhouette of what we assume is energy that will be there. And that's one of the ways that we are able to see ghosts. Now, I do have difficulty wanting to talk about this at great length because I know there are other systems who might see this. And I don't want anybody to worry or panic. What I'm going to say is what I have always said. There is a difference between mental health phenomenon and spiritual phenomenon. And the two worlds can coexist at the same time. However, the distinction is necessary. That way we are not mistaking one thing for another. And it's okay if we do, but sometimes we have to reevaluate what we actually think is going on. And suffice it to say, I spent a lot of fucking time thinking about this and reevaluating this constantly, non-stop. I always wonder if what I am experiencing is actually genuine experience or somehow made up. I'm always questioning this. So it's not that I take it at face value. And that's why it's very difficult to talk about my experiences with headmates and with spirits and other forms of divinity because each person's experience is unique unto their own. So I don't want to be one of those people that are going to say, oh, mental health phenomenon, it's actually just misunderstood spiritual shit. That's toxic and dangerous and bullshit. Some people, it's just mental health. Some people, it's just spiritual. But it's not fair to say that if you have some kind of neurodivergency or mental disorder that, oh yeah, there's going to be a spiritual element. I don't think that's always the case, and that's not going to be the answer for everybody. But after long hours and days, weeks, months, and at this point now years, trying to learn and figure out the difference, that's the conclusion that I've come to. Now, at this point, I don't want to go into great lengths about the way I interact with divinity, the way it was then, or any really of the spiritual craft that I was performing, because I finally decided at that point to take the plunge and start practicing witchcraft. I wanted to actually have a practice that I could form and utilize and actually move forward with, because it is something that I always had an interest in and something that I had always danced around the idea of. I had even started learning a little bit of witchcraft with my half-brother's mom when me and my system were teenagers. And for better or worse, when we were in our early 20s, we really got hyper fixated on a lot of the spiritual beliefs within New Age spirituality. Long story short, this just made sense. Becoming a omnitheist pagan who practices witchcraft. And another reason I don't want to talk too much about the way that I interact with divinity is because it's the way that people interact with divinity is unique unto each person. And the same way that I interact with so-and-so over here is going to be different with the way that I interact with so-and-so over there. That's the same for gods. That's the same for divine beings. So just because the way that I interact with one deity is different than the way that another person interacts with that same divinity, it doesn't mean that anybody's wrong. It doesn't mean that anybody's right. And I don't want to accidentally negate somebody's experience, and I don't want to open myself up to criticism. Though I'm sure in some way I already have. Either way, at this point in my little timeline that I am constructing here, I wound up moving away from YouTube again because now I wanted to seek answers to one very important question. What the hell happened to me? First off, what the hell happened to me back in 2019? Since then, I have personally come to my own conclusions that make sense for me, but it's just so out there that I don't even know 100% if I believe it. But at this point, I have satisfactory answers. Number 2, what the hell happened to me that made me a system? Now, within any system such as DID or OSDD, the thing that creates a system like this is repeated childhood trauma. When people are kids, every single one of us has several different personality states. Over time, those personality states integrate into one whole person. With the type of dissociative disorders that create systems, the reason that systems are created is because repeated trauma happens in childhood before these personality states integrate. And in order to forget that trauma, amnesia walls are put up either between all personality states and the trauma, or some alters can wind up being trauma holders, which means they remember. And amnesia walls are put up between them and everybody else. And this is exactly why a lot of systems wind up having a hard time communicating because of these amnesia walls. And that is exactly why within my system, we didn't know for many years that there was a system, or at least the front of the consciousness did not know, because there was an amnesia wall between the host of the system and everyone else. Now, of course, with any type of mental disorders such as these, there's always going to be different takes. There's always going to be more nuance that needs to be brought into it. But I don't want to turn this into a DID video. I still want to keep it within the context of this timeline that I am building. I'm just going to go ahead and say that no two systems are the same. No two systems form the same. And at the end of the day, everybody's system is going to be different, and every system's experience is going to be different, and every single alter within a system is going to be different. So if what I said doesn't vibe with you or what you know, that's okay. This is how I understand it, and this is the way that I've come to learn how this disorder functions in order for me to understand it for myself. That being said, the reason that I brought up the way that systems form is because I still had to ask the question, what the hell happened to me? and trauma happened. Very serious trauma that I'm not going to repeat here. One, for the sake of myself and my system, and two, it's very distressing, and I don't want to accidentally trigger anybody else. But I went ahead and I remembered it. I dug deep. I dug deep into my subconscious. I also realized a couple of things. That is, you will still, at least for me, I would still react emotionally to something in an appropriate manner, whether or not I remembered it. So I was able to see how I reacted to things and the way that I involuntarily responded to certain external situations. And that sort of helped me piece together more of the picture of what happened to me. I also took the time to try my best to remember my childhood, which I realized ice cream scoops of memory were just taken out. And that was one of the indicators that I wasn't faking this or wasn't making things up. There were chunks of time that were missing for me. So, since there were missing memories, I just wanted to ask why. So I started looking back on what I could remember in order to see what my indicators were. With all of this, I figured it out. And I remembered everything. Now, asking these questions, what the hell happened to me? What the hell happened in my childhood? And what the hell happened to me in 2019? This took up a lot of time. And it took up a lot of what I was able to do in order to dedicate my time to making YouTube content. So from the point of, say, I want to, May, June, and on until a couple of videos at the end of 2020, there's not a lot of content there because I was focusing on these questions. Fast forward to the end of 2020, I was spending a lot of time focusing on these questions, of which had very distressing answers. And in order to go back and look at these very traumatic experiences, it took a toll on my mental health. It really did. However, in the midst of all of it, I came to one stunning conclusion. Throughout all of this, throughout all of my experiences, from the beginning of this video until the end of this video, I was looking for Darren. Because I remembered the way that Host Memories remembered Darren. Darren was a character that would come in and help fix things, usually by fucking things up and then helping fix them. But everything was able to get set on track, and this mythical status of Darren was created. Where the hell was he? Where did Darren go? Oh my God. I am Darren. Well, if I'm Darren, what the hell happened to Aaron? Our dead name, the host name that nobody identifies with anymore. I looked around and I realized it was Dahlia. She had also forgotten. Something happened where when the host switch took place, we both forgot because all of the host memories stayed up here. So when that switch took place, Dahlia forgot who she was, and Darren forgot who he was. And then we sort of just looked at each other and we started talking it out, and we started just like, yeah, holy shit. Now, at this point, it's been well over a year since we realized that, and we have both taken the time to collectively remember our memories, and Yeah, I'm definitely not Aaron. And she's definitely not Darren. And she definitely is the person who was the host. Now, none of us identify with the host name. It is a dead name. But that is our birth name, and that is what I think, that is how do I want to phrase this? When Dahlia was the host, she didn't know that the rest of us were here. By the nature of DID and OSDD, these disorders are made in order for the host to forget. So she didn't know that we were here. Much less did she know that she was a female alter. So, around sophomore year of high school, the summer between sophomore and freshman year of high school, freshman and sophomore, is when she met me. Boy, I was a fucking jackass back then. But since I, in high school, was her first exposure to having any sense of realizing that there were more than her in here, that's just how it was. There was no reason for her to call herself a different name. So then when I met her after I met everybody else in March of 2020, she didn't remember that she was the former host. Especially since I had wound up in the position and taking that role. And I didn't remember that I was the former protector of this system. Now, I could go on and on and on, but if I'm going to, I should probably dedicate a whole other video to that, because this video is probably going to be well over an hour as it is. I have been sitting here myself for about 2 hours at this point just talking, which means it's probably going to be about an hour. So I'm just going to skip ahead to the point where as soon as I realized I was Darren, that's when me and our partner broke up. Right at the beginning of 2021, we broke up. Because in the midst of all of this, everything that I've explained here, everything that I've gone over, I didn't really talk about my relationship and how it went. And I'm still not going to, because it's not fair to them. What I am going to say, though, is things had become very dead between us. Things were very cold. And we had become very toxic for one another. So breaking up was mutually agreed upon and mutually beneficial. And even though we had a child together, we agreed that it was probably best that we still parted ways. That way, our son didn't have to be exposed to a toxic relationship being his parents and that be his role model for life. That's not fair to him, and that's not fair to anybody. So after that, I still continued to spend time focusing on the breakup, trying to figure out how things were going to work, and just dealing with all of that life hassle and drama. Now, it was around the time that I started doing and actually putting together my witchcraft. So around May-ish, April, May of 2020, that I started posting to TikTok, but it was very inconsistent, and it was just for fun whenever I thought of something, or there was something that I really wanted to share and put my 2 cents on, but it was very inconsistent. So now we fast forward to about a year after that. Me and my partner had broken up. She wound up moving out, and I was trying to figure something out because I knew I wasn't going to be able to stay there forever. But at this point, I had loads of experience, starting since I was a kid, researching demons, researching different religions. The bread and butter of everything that we do in our personal practice is death work. Working with the dead, healing the dead, helping them cross over, interacting with ghosts. That's one of the main things that we do, and we just don't talk about it on TikTok often. But since we had this wealth of experience to pull from, we had spent a lot of time just researching and hyperfixating on whatever deity that we were working with at that time. Oh my God, we have done so much research, and there is so much experience that we have gained and cultivated throughout all of this chaos. We figured we start uploading to TikTok onto the witchy side of TikTok. And I'm not going to catch everybody up on TikTok, because if you want to, just go ahead to my TikTok, just_Jaquel_23. That's where you're going to find everything that I've done since May of 2021. There is a couple of things that I don't have up there because I wound up doing an Archangel Michael interview series where it was a several video long series where I was basically doing an interview with Archangel Michael. And it wound up being a lot of New Age spirituality, angels, and the Galactic Federation of Light. Because those beings were amongst the group that put me through hell in 2019. However, continuing on to do that series with him, it was re-traumatizing. I was reliving everything that had happened in 2019, and the reason I wanted to do that series was to help Archangel Michael tell his side of the story. And I also wanted to be able to share my story. But whoa, so much interaction came in. It just flooded. I didn't think that was going to take off like that. And a lot of people actually were really receptive to it, but there were some people that were just god awful in the comments. And if nothing else, if you remember that series, just take it as entertainment. What I said about what I experienced with the Galactic Federation of Light and those beings, that's still 100%. But for the same reason I wound up taking down the Archangel Michael series is the same reason I don't want to go into a lot of that here. It's still trauma that I'm trying to work through. And I'm still trying to find a way to properly deal with it. But trying to make an expose with Archangel Michael and accidentally creating propaganda with him is not the way I want to go about it. Now, as I'm recording this, it is January of 2022, the first half of it. And I have very recently on my TikTok announced that I am going to softly depart from the witchy content on my TikTok. And this is the reason. Everything that I've said here is the reason. I opened this video saying in October of 2017 is when I started uploading to this channel. And I have spent this entire time struggling to get back to making YouTube and struggling to get back to just having fun. But making witchy content isn't fun anymore. The reason that is at this point, everything that you guys have seen on my TikTok has been me still trying to figure out what happened to me. It's been me going back over my life and going back over the darkest parts of it. When I started working with demons, there was a personal reason. When I started talking about demonolatry a lot, there was a personal reason. When I started talking about the theory of whether or not a human could become an infernal being, there was a personal reason. And now I'm at a point in my practice, in my craft, where the answers I was looking for, I have answers now. And there's no way that I am really going to be able to share that story, to share any of those stories without large amounts of people looking at me crooked. And that is why I want to reintroduce the Jaquel character. Because since the beginning of this channel, I have struggled to find an actual idea for who Jaquel is supposed to be. I have struggled with the Jaquel persona. But ultimately, Jaquel is me. Looking back now, I realize that Jaquel was the first thing that I created after I became the host of this system. This character sheet was created very shortly after I became the host of this system. And when I came to this channel, I wanted to make a brand for myself and make a niche for this channel. And I always struggled to figure out what that was going to be. But the answer was right in front of me all along. Doing what I fucking love to do. My best and my favorite videos have always come when I was just having fun. When I made the looking like a rock star video, it was fun. When I made the martial weapons demonstration video, when I made the surviving the hardcore scene video, when I made the internet comment etiquette video, and even though I'm skipped over the timeline, the chunk in the timeline where I created the Halloween hangover and the holiday hangover, those still came around when all I was doing was having fun. And the witchy content isn't fun anymore. Really, in many ways, I have come to a point in my path where it is a completion of this series of books. On my TikTok, I had said it this way. What you guys have seen is the tail end of a series of events. It's the ending of a chapter, but it is also the final chapter of a book series that has been going on when the first book was written 10 years ago. Even though the first book in this series starts and takes place 10 years ago, it has been nothing but consistently negative, traumatizing, and turbulent to say the least since we moved into the shithole or the moldy apartment back in July of 2016. Those were the last months that Dahlia was the host. That was when I thought I wasn't going to survive because things in that location were just that goddamn bad. I have been through so much. Me and my system have been through so fucking much. And I still feel like some parts of me are still stuck in the shithole apartment. Because everything started and got demonstrably worse starting there. And I've just constantly been looking for answers to figure out what happened in the shithole, what really went down, what happened in 2019, why was 2019 something that happened to me, what happened when I was a child that made me a system. I've been looking back on my past for so long, and I haven't looked forward in a very long time. And although my witchy craft isn't going to end, like, I say witchy as a generalization because not everything I do is specifically or inherently witchcraft, but I do practice the craft of a witch. That's just not all that I do. But it's time to end this series. It's time to put these books back on the shelf now that the story has been written. But there are so many things that if I am going to share and just tell my stories, nobody's going to believe me. Or they're going to believe that's something that I experienced but was ultimately a maladaptive daydream or something I misunderstood. And you know what? That might be an element of it. I'm not going to lie. Because it's hard for me to even say, oh yeah, that's what happened, when I know goddamn well how fucking insane it sounds. But over on TikTok, there are other creators that I have been drawn to a lot more than witchy creators. And that doesn't mean that I don't like the witchy creators. There are, oh my God, so many wonderful, beautiful, talented people on the witchy side of TikTok. They have helped me in my craft, watching them do their thing and share their experiences. I wanted to be like them. And now some of those people are even my mutuals. Some of those people I even talk to on a semi-regular basis. I lived a dream that came true. For the first time in my life, I found a community in which I feel I belong. And I don't want to give it up. But at this time, if I stay here with what's going on in my own life right now, if I continue on this path, I don't know if there's any coming back for me. I don't know if I will survive it. Because once again, I'm at a point in my life where my mental health sucks. And since I've been focusing on other content that has interests and comes from sources of intrigue other than witchcraft, I've started to feel alive again. Focusing on anything other than witchcraft has brought something back to me. And if that's what I need to do in order to get through another troubling time, is to go back to what I started doing on this channel and just having fun making content, then that's what I'm going to do. At the end of the day, I hope that there is something that my content can bring others moving forward, and that is entertainment. I think a lot of times we overlook the value of entertainment, even if it doesn't seem to have value, even if it doesn't seem to have any point or merit. When I was a kid, some of my favorite things growing up were parody movies. Kung Pao, Enter the Fist, Scary Movie 3, and if anybody has heard of it, God, I can't remember the name of it. Top Secret with Val Kilmer. These were parody, spoofy, goofy, pointless movies, and the only purpose of them was entertainment. We are living in a world right now where I don't think anybody is okay. And there are so many problems in the world, and there are so many voices that are needed to talk about these things, to talk about the problems that are going on, to talk about the racism, sexism, homophobia, all of the things that plague our world. But not every voice needs to be the person to do it. Because there are so many things that go on in the world, and because things with a pandemic that every single week there seems to be a new variant, with the world that seems to be on fire as we speak, with everything that is going on, the top 15 people of the world control a majority of the world's wealth and don't plan on sharing it, and none of the politicians in the US of A give a goddamn about any of us. Sometimes we need an escape. Sometimes we need to get away. And sometimes we need something that isn't all of this shit. And that's what I want my content to be. That's what I want my content to provide to other people. Because when I first started uploading to YouTube, it was because I was watching other YouTubers, even though they've been canceled now. I was watching Shane Dawson because I was coping with what was going on in my life. I needed a distraction that was pointless, mindless entertainment just to get me through a day. And then I just looked up and I said, hey, I can do that. And that's what I want to give to everybody else. Shane Dawson's been canceled. Destry Smith was another one that was a favorite. He's been canceled for even better reasons, and I'm not going to get into it here, but if you don't know, you should probably check it out. That motherfucker should be canceled a long time ago. But some of these content creators that I looked up to wound up actually being garbage people. But they still inspired me. But now there is a vacuum where they once were, which was pointless, stupid, mindless entertainment that the only point it served was to distract yourself from everything else that was going on. And in a world and an environment where everything sucks, maybe that's a little bit more of what we need so other people can be able to get through the day. And that's what I hope I can do. And that's what I want to start doing. And maybe somewhere down the line I start working on this Jaquel cosplay and start focusing on creating with the alter ego that is Jaquel, the half-orc supreme. Maybe I can also start telling my story, but in such a way that nobody is expected to believe it, because Jaquel is a half-orc, half-elf creature that I created, and Dungeons and fucking Dragons, and nobody needs to take it seriously but telling my story, woven in a fantastical setting, will still do something good for me, and it will still provide the type of entertainment for others that I am hoping to provide. And that's what I want to do. That's what Jaquel is. Because at the end of the day, Jaquel was only ever supposed to be a hyperinflated, over-exaggerated expression of who I am. Jaquel is me. But if I am going to believe that I am Jaquel, there's already problems there. I'm not literally a half-orc, half-elf. But boy, there is just so much that I have to offer, and sometimes the only way I feel I can offer it is either being Jaquel, the half-orc supreme, or just being Jaquel, the world's worst YouTuber. Kind of like how, even though everything goes on in the comic books, at the end of the day, Spider-Man is still just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I just want to be Jaquel, the world's worst YouTuber. That's it. And on that note, I bid you guys adieu. Thank you guys for being here with me, and thank you for coming along on this journey with me. It's really meant a lot. Until next time, much love. Peace out. Namaste and goodbye.